I call this meeting to order. This is the regular school board meeting of the Northfield Public Schools. It is Tuesday, May 28th, 7 p.m. Dr. Richardson, there were a couple items.
A couple of items on the table file. We have some personnel items, including appointments, increase, decrease, and change of assignments, some retirement resignations, also advancement in terms of licensed staff to tenure at various levels, and then also the actual recommendation for employment forms.
Great. If there's no objection, we will add those to the consent grouping as we move forward. Public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the community to address the board. This is not a time for debate. This is a listening opportunity by the board. I would ask you to state your name, the group you represent, your home address, and limit your remarks to 3 minutes.
Okay. My name is Rich Falk, and I'm here tonight representing the Northfield Lacrosse Association. My address is 12273 Falk, that's F-A-L-K Trail, Northfield. And I'm here to voice support for the proposal to add boys and girls lacrosse as a sanctioned varsity and junior varsity sports program for the 2013-2014 academic year. As Vice President of the Northfield Lacrosse Association and a parent of a boy and a girl who are both participating in the sport, I can attest to the growth in popularity in Northfield and across Minnesota. Here's a brief overview of what has happened in the last 3 years. In the first year, the Northfield Lacrosse Association fielded 2 teams, a middle school and grade 9-10 boys team that had about 40 boys playing in the sport. In the second year, we added a grade 11-12 boys team and a grade 7-8 girls team, adding about another 35 players to the program. At the same time, there were about 30 or so high school girls who formed their own team to practice lacrosse on their own without any league to play in. This spring, we expanded the boys program to 5 teams, and since there is no organized club program for the high school girls, we arranged scrimmages for our high school girls to play games against established programs at Shattuck, Owatonna, Burnsville, and Chaska-Chanhassen. So today, there are 7 teams and over 130 boys and girls playing lacrosse in Northfield. With a strong foundation of youth players that has been established over the past 3 seasons, we anticipate that Northfield can field a competitive program today and have sustainability for the future. Looking ahead, the Northfield Lacrosse Association is planning on donating our varsity jerseys to help the program get the high school program off to a start, and we're planning to continue to try to grow the sport by offering it to younger ages. We would not be here today without the help of Erin Mayberry and Melissa Bernard at Community Services, Tracy Clausen regarding our game fields, and the encouragement of Tom Broutman, and the countless hours that parents and volunteers have shared of their time. Finally, beyond the number of players and the dollars involved in any of these programs, I would like to share a comment that of a parent of a 7th grade girl that was made to me last week on a game prior to playing Farmington. She said that lacrosse was the first sport that her daughter had ever been interested in playing. All through elementary school, she avoided sports and aggressive competition. This spring, she decided to try lacrosse, and she loves it. Her mother has seen a whole new side of her daughter, and she's actually initiating action rather than letting it happen to her, and her mother's thrilled by this. So the program is filled with many stories like this. We've attracted a number of boys and girls who do not participate in the spring sport or any sport at all. Offering a new sports program gives kids an opportunity to gain new experiences, gain new friends, develop new skills on and off the field. So thank you for considering the proposal to add lacrosse for the coming school year. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else who wishes to address the board? All right. We'll move on to approval of the minutes. Board members, you have in your packet the minutes that were held from the school board that was held on May 13th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Moved by Carrie. Second. Seconded by Ann. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes say aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carries. The minutes are approved. Announcements and recognition.
Okay, I do have a couple this evening. First of all, again, we talked a little bit last time about the Eat, Talk, and Connect group that announced their grand prize winners. Again, this was a program that was really set up with the idea of encouraging families to connect during their meal times. And they actually identified 2 prize-winning families. In Northfield, the Menson family from Sibley Elementary School won a collection of gift certificates from local businesses. And our I think we're very pleased with the opportunities to get together and talk at mealtime. Also would like to recognize Jess Martin. Jess is a 5th grader at Greenvale Park. She received an award yesterday in Brooklyn Center. She's part of the stock market game that's set up through the Best Prep organization out of the Twin Cities. There were a couple of teams that were set up at Greenvale Park. Jess also decided that she would enter a national essay contest about investment opportunities. And Jess won 1st place in the Minnesota division and also received national honors. So her plaque will be on display in the entryway at Greenvale Park. So again, congratulations to Jess. Again, this is really tied to economics and basically learning skills in terms of financial preparedness. The next announcement we'd like to make is the Community Action Center, again, which is one of our collaborative partners who works with us in terms of programming, is going to be receiving a College Ready grant in the amount of $126,345 from the Great Lakes Higher Education Guarantee Corporation, and that will be used to support the Torch program as we move forward. So the CAC is a part of a collaborative group that supported Torch and is one of 34 recipients to receive some of the $4 million in College Ready grant funds awarded by Great Lakes. And again, we've been very fortunate during the last several years to have had the support of the Great Lakes Higher Education Guarantee Corporation. There was a while where they decided they were not going to give awards in Minnesota, and so we had a couple of years when we were looking for other resources, but we're now back in that game, and again, that's going to provide significant support to us for 2013-14 in terms of academic preparedness of youth in grades 6 through 12 who are low income, or students of color, or who are potential first-generation college attendees. So again, a great opportunity for us to continue forward with Torch. And then also I'd like to recognize that our students who were involved in the Latino Play Festival, and I hope that some of you maybe had an opportunity to attend last week. We also had a visit from Kara Levin on May the 17th, and at that time Kim Imsley basically spent kind of the morning with the students, so they were able to capture a part of the rehearsal, and then she actually sat down and interviewed a number of the kids on stage to give them an opportunity to talk about their experiences with the Latino Play Festival and the opportunities to share information about what it's like growing up as a Latino student here in Northfield. We have not, at least at this point, gotten the date as to when this is going to be broadcast. Kim had said at the time that it would not be until after last Thursday's presentation, so we haven't heard about that yet. But again, I think a really good opportunity for the kids to get some recognition for some really great work they've done on the plays. So those are the announcements that we have for this evening, as far as I'm aware.
Ann?
I have one. It was just last week, I believe, that we had the service learning projects displayed at the high school, and it was really great as usual. And I applaud Sarah Swan McDonald for her work. Just a couple examples that are sort of representative of what we saw. Is there was one student working on safe and sober driving, and it just worked out that on that day that she was presenting it for service learning was also the date for the mock crash at the high school here. And the other one that was quite different was collecting shoes for people who cannot afford shoes, and they had a wonderful big basket full of pairs of shoes from the students. So that's just a little sampling of what I saw. It was great.
And they found out that social media was a really powerful way to enhance a number of their projects.
That's true.
Right? Most of the kids that I talked to had said, yes, we put this on Facebook, or we Twittered about it, or tweeted. Never mind. I've got my ignorance showing already, but basically use those social media strategies to really get the information out to students. They said, however, in the end, the best way to get information out to kids is to make sure that you have the table right in front of the lunchroom doors, because that most everybody in the building goes past that during the lunch hours.
Other announcements? Julie?
I actually wanted to talk about the mock crash for just a second, because I was fortunate enough to be able to attend it on Friday, and it was done Friday afternoon, and it was attended by all junior and senior students. And mock crash is a realistic portrayal of a crash scene that dramatically demonstrates the horrific consequences of a drunk driver. And there were a number of people involved that deserve our thanks. So if you'll bear with me, I wanted to run through the list quickly. It's quite an extensive undertaking, and there were 7 different law enforcement agencies that were involved, along with Healthy Community Initiative, who sponsored the postcard mailing that went to parents informing them about the crash. Officer Thad Monroe, who moderated the crash, Andy Langhow from Benson and Langhow, and Jim Bierman from Bierman Funeral Home, Roger Fetty for his donation of a sound system, and Chris Maddock for his work on makeup. The victims in the vehicle were played by Northfield High School students and families: Alex Hansen, Seth Hansen, Megan Christofferson, Jake Matheson, Stephen Fanning, and Tony and Cheryl Matheson. Also thanks to our high school custodial staff and administrators who did a great deal of work to set up the crash scene. And finally, our thanks to Lisa Weiss, who is a special education teacher here at the high school, and her sister Kim Gasland, who told an incredibly powerful and emotional story about Kim's accident involving a drunk driver and how it changed the course of her life forever. So we really appreciate the efforts of all of these people to pull that together, because it was absolutely, I think, a very valuable thing for our students to witness.
All right. Other announcements or recognition? Okay, we are ready to move on to our first item for discussion report, which I believe is our professional learning community from the middle school. And Jeff, it looks like you've got a full crew with you.
Dr. Richardson and members of the board, we appreciate you hosting us for our annual presentation on professional learning communities. We have about a 20-minute video. Sounds like it's starting out. And when we're finished, we have just a little bit more information to share with you, and we have a panel made up of faculty members that you'll see in this video. And representing the middle school today will be from the 7th grade social studies PLC is Earl Wyman, and his partner in that you'll see in the video is Lisa Hubden. And we also have from our music PLC, we have Ethan Fryer and Kathy Penning, and in one of probably his last official capacities today, Paul Beck, who will be retiring at the end of the school year. So what I do want to set this video up by letting you know that over the years, probably right away the first year that we had professional learning communities, we learned that the secondary schools are quite a different animal than the elementary schools when it comes to how they're organized. And it sometimes takes creativity, it sometimes takes unique combinations of staff. And what we've tried to do in the storytelling, which once again, the story is put together by our videographer, Amy Sieve, who did a great job with it, tries to tell the story of what's happening in the PLC meetings and what happens in the classroom, and go back and forth between those two. And we also try to split the time between 2 PLCs, showing a more traditional PLC and one of the electives or one of the fine arts or other type of academic areas, to show how that's different than a 1st or 2nd grade team might look like. So we're going to go ahead and look at the video, and then we'll have our panel come up at the end.
And we teach social science in 7th grade. This year we are trying to create more assessments that are more skill-based rather than knowledge-based. We had looked at last year's essential learnings, and we realized that most, if not all of them, were reproducing knowledge or what they have learned with in showing that in terms of multiple choice and question, answer, short answer, that sort of thing. But we felt that social science is, a great deal of social science is skill-based. Learning how to interpret a graph, say in economics, how to conduct an oral history, how to, for example, in political science, I'm creating a unit right now where students create their own Bill of Rights. That way they will understand the debate that goes behind it. Mostly they'll understand that with every right comes a responsibility and comes a consequence. And so we are just in the infancy right now of trying to find for every unit what's the essential skill associated with that learning in social studies.
First, I'm going to give you a sheet that looks like this. This is your preamble. Now remember, we talked about the preamble to the Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union.
One value in the PLC is something that I never learned in college, and I've only gained this knowledge in the PLC, and that's the SMART goal. And the SMART goal is something that allows us to quantify what we do each day, what we do each week, and what we do at the end of the unit. It gives us a measurable benchmark by which we can evaluate how successful were the students, and if one is able to look at themselves honestly, how successful you were or we are as teachers.
Our SMART goal then for this current school year is by the conclusion of the 2012-2013 school year, we will broaden our student assessments in 7th grade social science so that 75% of students will demonstrate through various assessments 4 measurable skills related to social science that complement the essential learnings we created last year. At this point, we've developed 3 out of the 4 skills that we'd like students to demonstrate by the end of the year. The first is to be able to conduct an oral history or an interview. The second is students will be able to make inferences and interpret graphs as related to our economics unit. The third is the students will be able to devise and debate a student Bill of Rights with demonstrating knowledge of the consequences and responsibilities associated with each right.
So that's my preamble. Then, after you get your preamble as a group, figure out your basic values, you're going to write your Bill of Rights. 10 rights that a student should have. These are things I want you to keep in mind. Look at them one by one.
Now, these here, you start thinking of values. If you go, think of some of the values your parents instill in your house, in your family. What are some values they have in the household? Not rules, but values. This will be the form of these. So they'll fill in. All students have the right to blank, and I'll give them examples. And as they finish it, what we'll do is I'll have each class, since I have 5 classes, pick their top 2. As a class, they will vote for the top 2. And hopefully by the end of the day, we will have 10 amendments, so to speak, of the most important rights to each for the 7th grade.
What's some value to be respected as individuals?
Yeah.
Okay, to be respected.
So like
Students have the right to wear what they choose within the.
What do you have for,
Okay.
you're working in economics, right?
Yeah, I'm working on economics, and I've just started the unit. So I think for mine, I like to begin the unit by looking at the basic topics of scarcity and opportunity costs. And so in my lesson, I'm going to start with, I'm just trying to, like you said, sketch this out in my head here because this is something that I'm planning for coming up here. I'm going to start off by showing them something that they maybe would all desire, like maybe like a piece of candy or an extra credit coupon or something like that, and explain that there's not enough to go around. And then we're going to look at how do we allocate something, a good or a service, when there's not enough. Like here in the United States, how do we decide who gets what? There's not always one way. Okay, let me give you some examples. I'm going to go through different ways that a society could decide who gets what. Let's see if any of these work for distributing the candy today. If you want to go with it, I'll give you a second one. Lottery style. Okay, some people set up here. Did anybody say at this time? No. Kind of a birthday one, maybe to an extent. What if we do this? What if I take my envelope of numbers, now that we have new seats, what if I pull a number out? Like, let me give you an example of the lottery. Okay, you've got your new seats here. I'm going to pull a number out. If I pull your number, you can now pick any seat in the class. You can bump a person out. You can how are you doing now? Oh, this is wonderful.
Have them, I think it's crucial to have them come up with the point, rather than you tell them what, they have, I don't know if you do it in the form of an economic law that they have to write.
So, I'm going to start with a sentence here on the board. As a group, you tell me how you finish it off. We're looking at our first economic law. This tends to be true. The law of scarcity. Okay, I'm going to start it off, you finish off the sentence. That's one of our first economic laws we're going to look at. All things are limited. Think about what we did today. Therefore. Okay, volunteers first. Let's start with Siri and Elijah. I don't know who wants to talk. You guys can decide. All things are limited. Crystal, okay. Whoever.
Therefore, not everyone is going to be happy.
Okay. And that's oftentimes true. Do you feel like in life, in society, not everybody's going to be happy? Based on how much there is to go around. Are there times when you feel like you didn't get what you deserved?
No, we're going to get you to. We're setting this as school board, not because they will make all these changes. No one grade has that kind of power. However, how can they ever make a change if they don't know what you feel strongly about? The idea here is for you to have a voice in that board. The administration speaks to the board every month. Teachers often speak to the board. The public goes to the board. How often do students speak to the board? This is your way of communicating to the board. And even if nothing happens of it, I think they will find it rather intriguing to see school from your perspective. Okay, let's start in the back. Give me your best two. I'm going to summarize here before we vote.
Share your opinion at the right time.
Okay, share opinions. We'll get the official wording when we write it here. If you want learning of judgments. Okay. If you want, speak freely without repercussion. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Feel comfortable, physically, emotionally, psychologically.
Yeah, when I teach this again in the spring, I think I want to do something slightly different. I don't know.
Yeah, did you go too fast? What did you think?
I think so. I probably didn't give them enough guidance in what I was looking for. I just kind of said, how would you decide? And I left it pretty broad and pretty wide open.
What's a way that one group did things that was particularly clever or effective?
Well, there was one group that talked about the idea of like first come, first serve. You know, they thought, you know, whoever comes into the room first, whoever's.
I thought it would be difficult, and it was difficult in some respects, but I think that the greatest thing that worked in that was the discussion that happened while they were trying to decide what the rights were. You always had people that were just looking out for themselves and others trying to guide them about a certain population. For example, one Bill of Rights that got rejected is someone wanted only 7th grade dances for only 7th grade. And it is funny, what little nuances can change an entire lesson. I learned from that, I think. Not that I wouldn't do it again in terms of telling the students, but I should talk a little bit more about what is a right. It's funny, you just think they would know what a right is, rather than, we're doing, I think, essentially the same thing.
Yeah, I think so too.
We're getting students to look at something they take for granted.
Yeah.
The resources they get mostly are allocated by somebody else, but the Bill of Rights, they don't think about the rights that they have in school to any great extent. I think it helps them to dig deeper, and hopefully it's much better, I think, doing this for a day or two than just rattling out about the Bill of Rights.
When we look back on our summative assessment from last year, we might say, for example, 29 out of 49 students scored 80% or better on the assessment. We can use that as kind of a basis for what we want to change this year. We can look at parts of the assessment and see what students did well on and what we need to maybe recreate or adjust or monitor, as Earl said, for our students this year to create a better experience for them and to help them understand the information better.
Almost every year, our SMART goal really tries to bite off more than we can chew. And the fact that it has flexibility, we can change the percentages to accommodate what we're learning about the students and about our SMART goal, and we can change our goals. And that flexibility allows us to be realistic. I think we came in last year with a very unrealistic SMART goal, and we, in our evaluation of it, we were careful not to do that this year. Probably the most difficult thing about the SMART goal this year is coming up with what skill do the students need, and how can we complement that with our curriculum. And I think we're on a good track. I'd like the public to know, the Northfield public to know that this sacrifice does not go unnoticed. It's a sacrifice for parents to make arrangements every Wednesday for their children. It's a commitment that they have put into this educational system to allow us to do that. And it is appreciated by teachers, but it goes unsaid for probably too long. I think that's our essential learning is we want you to know that we do appreciate the school board and the public for giving us this 1 hour every week to do what we think is in the best interest of all students.
The PLC process in general for us has been great because it gives us a chance to bounce ideas off each other, and just overall the district clearly supports the idea that they don't want us to be in a rut, and they want all teachers to continually improve, continually to look for new ideas and new processes where we can help students learn.
I was going to show you too, even your pitch pipe sound, it can be a clarinet sound, or it can be the piano sound, or just a tone. And then the tone.
Well, our SMART goal right now is to find 2 apps that 75% of a selected group of students achieve 100% accuracy of naming notes and solfege, and we're trying to do that by May 22nd. And so we're spending some time this year trying to hit the ground running next year with the iPad apps that we find to be useful with teaching music.
The cool thing for me that I'm finding is that, I've been working with solfege, which is all about pitch relationships for singing, and they're learning to do do to mi versus if that's a C versus an E, they're understanding, and we can actually delve into different parts of the music. So now we're bringing in rhythms, and they'd rather sing it to me than they would clap a rhythm. So we're making progress on solfege. So we're talking about solfege today, and solfege in relation to best practices with using Kodai that our students learned in elementary is the relationship of pitches, and it's actually using a scale. What we're doing is all pitch relationships with solfege, and once we learn pitch relationships and we can see it in regards to using solfege pitches, then we can switch over to words and work on the nuances, the expression and all that, and not have to do standing behind the piano where I'm teaching, okay, here's the pitch relationship, now sing what I just played. Ready? And. Can you switch over words? Okay? Yes. I bet you know what you're doing now a little bit more. Solfege is big to start with. Yeah, because one of our SMART goals is finding apps that we can use with students next year, getting the iPads.
This was an app that we found at the music convention up in Minneapolis. So music educators had a session on 60 apps for the iPad. Well, I think we ought to have some kids try playing off of this just to see what they think of playing off of an iPad.
Yeah. 1 and 2 and play. Specifically at apps that will help students with their note name recognition, and there are also some apps that help with counting and rhythmic accuracy, and Kathy is especially working on apps that help her students learn solfege.
1, 2, 3. Do, do, re, do, do, re, mi, re, do, do, re, mi, fa, mi, re, do, re, mi, fa, sol, re, mi, re, do, re, do, re, si, fa, sol, fa, mi, re.
Okay, well what this is, guys, is that this is, we're looking for 2 apps to use on the iPad, and not necessarily with you students that are in 8th grade, but looking for like beginners in the 6th grade that are coming in and they're having problems knowing their note names. And so we've got 2 apps. This one is Read Music, and I'd like you guys to try this and let me know how you feel it's going. And it's on naming notes, because we're finding that a lot of the 6th grade kids coming in don't know the names of the notes on the lines and the spaces here. And so we're thinking that if we can have everybody have their iPad out and do just a couple minutes of this at the beginning of each rehearsal, then it'll help go a long ways in helping them learn their note names. So 2, 2, yep. Ready? Go.
But just think, I mean, next year, if everybody's got those, well, you could just take one step, the whole band do it for, you know, I'm going to say, you know, we're going to do it for 2 minutes, I'm going to walk around and see what your score is, you know, and like, you know, just don't clear your screen, I'm going to come around and check it, and for those of you that are struggling with it, we're going to do it some more.
Well, and for 2 minutes, I mean, you could even have something on the board that says, here's our goal, and just see how close you guys came. You know, you can even do a quick show of hands. How many people got 50% of it correct? 60, you know.
It's all nice for practicing with the metronome right in there.
Here's, you got the metronome, you can have it audible, you can have it visible. The whole page just comes out at you, or you can have both. And that works for the visual learner and the different style learners. So, one of the things that solfege actually helps with is intonation, because they know where their half steps are and where the whole steps are, depending on the key that we are in. It helps with intonation, it helps with our music literacy overall, and it actually expands the complexity of music that we're able to perform and sing. And maybe that's why our Northfield choirs throughout, you know, all the way up through the grade levels, that we are known throughout the state as being one of the top choirs.
Hello, my name is Earl Wyman. I teach middle school social science, and as you saw in the video, I made a promise to my 7th grade students that I would present to you their final Bill of Rights.
Here we go.
What you had witnessed in the video was basically only half of what we had done. That was the first semester, and then the next semester with the 125 other students, they had fine-tuned what the first semester had done, and they've added their own. The biggest problem with this initially was they were too specific. They wanted larger lockers, and they wanted specific things for lunch. But as we went, they came to understand that a couple of criteria, these had to apply to all students, and they had to be broad enough to be interpreted for this year, next year, 10 years from now. Because one characteristic of a right is it's broad enough for interpretation, as we know with the frequent debate on the Bill of Rights. So I'm going to share with you the Student Bill of Rights for the middle school, and I will present to you this. I made this suitable for framing for you, but the students made it suitable for implementation. So I'm going to present this to, as I told the students I would, I'll present it to the chair and one for each of you. First, it starts with the preamble and then the rights. We, the students of Northfield Middle School, in order to establish ownership and invest deeper into our education and school day, do hereby ordain and establish these rights based on the principles of scholarship, respect, and self-determination. Number 1, all students have the right to their opinions voiced freely without criticism and to be taken seriously. Number 2, all students have the right to advocate for themselves in academics. Number 3, all students have the right to opportunities in which to socialize with others. Number 4, all students have the right to speak freely but respectfully to teachers. Number 5, all students have the right to have input on what elective classes are best suited to their needs. Number 6, all students have the right to equal attention from staff regardless of race, ability, or income. Number 7, all students have the right to be shown trust from the staff. 8, all students have the right to representation on matters that impact them. Number 9, all students have the right to be comfortable. And 10, all students have the right to have classes taught at different paces. So I present the middle school Bill of Rights to you from the 7th grade social science class.
Thank you.
So we'll have Mr. Wyman come up here for any questions you have, and Ross, just so you can see the faces of our music people, they'll be up here if you have any questions, and if not, at least so you can see who they are back behind the podium.
Yes, come right up to the mic.
All right, Anne?
This was really fun to watch, and I couldn't help but think how your two departments should get together and write a whole new and better Schoolhouse Rock. It's just great, and I love it that you're doing solfege. I didn't know that. If you were doing solfege with any of my children, I had no clue that they were doing that, but that's wonderful.
Helped a lot with sight reading.
Yeah.
John?
Earl, is this Bill of Rights intended to be interpreted as a living document or as it was intended in 2013?
Definitely a living document. That's probably the hardest thing we had to do was keep rewording it so it would apply for years to come. And it's much better because they would tell me that we want bigger lockers. Then what? Then you're done. And we had to try to create scenarios where this could apply to grades far into the future. And we do teach them what a living document is.
Other questions or comments? Julie?
Is this the first time you've done that project?
It is. We did. It started with the Constitutional Convention, and it went much longer than I thought it would, and a lot of tweaks along the way. But I will be doing it in the future. I don't know if I will use that document or show that document, or if I will keep presenting it to you. I don't know. But it was a very good first step. So I've never done this before. But it was, again, one of those skill-based activities, because we realized that everything we did was more knowledge-based in our smart code, and we had everything skill-based goals.
Carrie?
I was really intrigued by this shift to skill-based assessments, and I'm wondering if you've had an opportunity to share that shift with other PLCs and other content areas.
We will do that, I believe, Wednesday.
Tomorrow morning.
Well, there we go.
There we go.
Yes, we will. We have an opportunity to share every year, at least a few times a year. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I mentioned, we were going to do all 7. We had to bring it down to 4 because it took much more time and forethought than we realized that we wanted to do it right.
Sure.
So we did 4 instead of 7.
Yeah.
And we went 3 later.
And then I just also want to add appreciation for having the 2 different content areas. You know, to have music, it's a very different kind of PLC than a traditional academic area, and I think it's really valuable for the board to see both of those kinds of PLCs in action. So thank you for sharing your perspective as well as a more traditional content area.
Thank you.
Other questions?
So I had 2. One's a question and one's a comment. The question was Earl, you mentioned that next year you're going to be tackling more
So what's on the horizon?
In terms of the SMART goal, we're going to add 3 more skill-based assessments. As I indicated, we had a little bit of fumbling with the schedule and how much time these would take. And we didn't want to rush it. We wanted quality rather than fulfill SMART. So we actually changed the SMART goal to reflect. We actually changed the evaluation because the evaluation we had in our SMART goal was really an academic, knowledge-based evaluation. So now we changed it to a rubric as a novice, apprentice, journeyman, expert in demonstrating the skill. So that's on our PLC website as well. So we realized we're evaluating them based on the criteria that didn't fit the skill.
Oh, that's really neat that you, not only is it changing the way you're teaching, but the way you're thinking about the whole evaluation process. That's great. And then my comment was I was really pleased to hear about what's going on with the iPads and the PLCs too, because we're getting hints of that, but it was really exciting to think about what's on the horizon and how that's going to change the music classes next year when they have that and their voice and their instrument, and that was exciting to see. So, anything else for everybody? Well, I so appreciate the work that went into this presentation. As Carrie said, to have 2 very different perspectives that are so student-centered, it's really exciting to see and have you come and answer our questions, so thank you.
Can I add one more thing?
Mm-hmm.
I forgot to mention this, but when I mentioned to them that I was presenting to this to the board,
mm-hmm.
and this is a compliment to you, it really ratcheted up the commitment that they had into doing this right. And that was kind of a nice motivator for them to dig in.
Well, you have to thank the students for their hard work and getting all the board members to reflect on what their perspective is. So.
I guess just one other thing, and again, thank you guys. I think both of these pieces very nicely shared some very different perspectives about how PLCs can be used. And I think we've seen that throughout the year. And again, we do this on a regular basis for the board so that you do get a chance to see from various buildings how PLCs are being implemented. I think the power that we see with these is the power of adults being able to collaborate and talk about and think about how you're going to move forward. And even with the music tonight, it was also, you were collaborating with some of the older students to say, okay, you guys have kind of been through this. How would you think a 6th grader who may be struggling with notes or struggling with names and whatever needs to do that? I guess I also appreciated with the social studies presentation, the playoff between you and Lisa talking about not only your own piece, but also how you were reflecting and supporting her, and she was reflecting and supporting you. And that's a power of collaboration that you just can't get when we have you in your classroom with the door shut. And so, I just want to reiterate for the board, I think that's where this thing really takes off. And I think stepping beyond the traditional academic pieces to really think about the idea that we're looking not only at memorizing facts and sharing facts back, but we're also looking at what are the skills and processes you need to use in order to really function, not only as a student, but also as an adult. And I think both of these very powerfully showed how we could put those pieces together. So again, thank you very much.
And thank you, Paul, for your last week or so here to come and present. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, well, he's memorialized now because we'll have him up on the website here pretty soon.
All right. We are ready to move on to our second item for discussion report, which is the DPAC goals for the 2013-2014 school year. And it looks like Mary is going to lead with Kyle and Helena.
Yes. Thank you for inviting us here tonight to share with you what our work during this past year has been. We would like to thank the board, the staff, and the community members who participated in DPAC this year. It is a very important advisory committee for our school district. And I'd like to introduce Helena and Kyle, our co-chairs, and they will take it from here.
I think most of the board has served on DPAC, if not all, but we still have a few slides to explain DPAC for anyone watching the video later online or in the audience. The District Education Program Advisory Committee, otherwise known as DPAC, is a place where community members and the school district staff can get together and discuss the educational programs that are offered and any improvements that might be made to them. We take those improvements and put them in the form of goals to be presented to the school board for ratification, and if they're ratified, they're worked on in the following school year. DPAC has community members, usually parents, staff members, usually teachers, administrators, and school board members on it. We divide the work of what improvements we'd like to make into 3 subgroups. So there's a subgroup on student assessment, teaching and learning, which includes curriculum, and student services. Each of those subgroups will review their area, listen to presentations, or read books and do research on that area. They'll take that information, look at the current programs being offered in that area, and develop goals for the following school year that they think can improve the services. And they'll take those goals in the subgroups and bring them to the entire committee, which we approve a full list for the board, which Helena is going to read for the 2013-14 school year.
All right. So many of you have participated in articulation of these goals, and you will see that some of them are a continuation and expansion of goals from last year, some are new. So first, let's look at assessment goals. The first goal is we will partner with community agencies that serve students by providing meaningful data support, emphasizing key transitions young people make on the cradle to career continuum. Students, teachers, and parents will collaborate by using a broad range of student information to select individual approaches for personal growth aligned with student strengths and challenges. Let's move to teaching and learning goals. The district will continue implementation of a system of academic and behavioral intervention, the RTI, at the elementary level, and begin implementing that system at the secondary level during the 2013 and 14 academic year. And the district will implement consistent standards-based grading strategies and procedures at the elementary level and continue studying standards-based grading at the secondary level during the 2013 and 14 academic year. And the third goal, the district will provide curricular and staff development support in the implementation of the tablet initiative using the substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition model. And finally, the student services goals. The district will establish specific behavioral expectations, train staff, and teach pro-social behaviors to all students that promote respect, responsibility, and self-regulation. And the second goal, the district will foster school connectedness among students, families, and staff, promoting mutual respect and enhancing emotional health. So these are our goals. If you have any questions.
Board members, questions?
We should remind everyone that the goals don't always change. Sometimes people have no improvements in an area and they recommend the same goal next year. And also, I've been on the committee for 3 years, and this was by far the most ambitious list assembled. And many people are a little bit worried it's too much, but we still felt everyone should go ahead.
And the goal was to make sure that what we say is understandable to the community, to parents, to everybody, not just to the community.
Some of the wording is longer.
Yes, because of that, exactly. Instead of acronyms, we have to say things.
Board members? Bob?
First of all, I think Ellen and I were on the assessment committee back in like 2004, so just be careful where this might end up. But thank you, especially to the community members, because it's, a lot of work, every month, and basically the only pay you get is cookies. So
some good juice sometimes.
Yeah, and some juice. Yeah, so thank you. I guess I'll criticize myself since I was on the curriculum committee. Those 3 goals to me seem very specific and different from the other kinds of goals. And I remember in 2004, Dr. Richardson saying to take the 30,000-foot view and to look at a bigger picture rather than specific goals. But when I see RTI and I see standards-based grading and I see the SAMR model, I see really specific things rather than general things. So, and they also are all things that are on the schedule for staff development already. So it seems like these goals are more like an endorsement of things that are already happening rather than setting broader goals. So I mean, that's just my impression of those goals, that maybe moving forward there would be some broader vision of what the goals are than endorsing specific programs.
I had the same thought in our last meeting that the curriculum subcommittee has much more specific goals than the other groups, and is that appropriate? But I felt it was okay in that there is nothing else we'd rather have them work on in that area.
I think we also put some specific deadlines on when things will be implemented and what we will be studying. And I felt also that with the tablet, as you recall, last year, we kind of edited. This was a new initiative that just kind of came up at the end of our work year. So I think in this goal, we're actually committing to providing staff development and kind of describing how that implementation will occur. So I felt on that goal, we actually broadened what we said last year, and we have, since we have a vision of how this will be implemented, and we saw this in this wonderful presentation. So I guess.
And one of the other ways I justified the same question to myself was that you can state each of those goals in a more general fashion. You can describe RTI in regular language if you choose to. But since everyone reading it already knows what it is, it was okay to shortcut that.
Board members, other questions or comments? Julie?
I just had a comment about the student services goals, as that is the subcommittee that I serve on. And I just wanted to elaborate a bit about the first goal, which was to establish specific behavioral expectations, train staff, and teach pro-social behaviors. And I think that is a really excellent goal. And I think, again, to Rob's point, it does put some real sort of meat behind that effort, in that we are going to be very, very intentional about teaching pro-social behaviors to our students. And I think that we do responsive classroom in the elementary level, and we talk about school connectedness, we talk about emotional health, that sort of thing. But this is a very, very intentional effort that will be made to teach those pro-social behaviors. And we feel that in light of where social media is going as a tool, but also as a very powerful weapon, that it's a very timely goal for the committee to have.
Thanks, Julie. Other questions or comments? Well, I would thank Kyle and Helena for your service in leading the DPAC. I think one of the biggest successes of DPAC is the fact that we have these committed community members that are willing to spend their time all year talking about at that 30,000-foot view in these 3 areas. And so I so appreciate the fact that what comes out of that committee is not just school board, it's not just administration, it's this community voice coming through, and your leadership has really been solid this year. So I would thank you for that too.
Yeah, we'd like to thank all the teachers and staff that come who are not administrators and school board members. They volunteer their time. All they get is cookies as well.
Right.
And we learn a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. We are ready for our third item. Oh, and there she is. The general fund budget. And Val is going to be presenting that to us.
So So there's light at the end of the tunnel. General fund is the last one. So I'm just going to start with going over the assumptions that we used in the revenue budget. General education aid, we have projected a 1.5% increase, which is about $78 per pupil, which we know for sure now that the legislative session is done that that's a for sure thing. So we got that in there. For federal, we do know for sure that there's going to be at least a 5% sequestration. So I did it across the board on all of our federal programs, just to be conservative. There's no word for sure that it will be on all of them, but it's probably likely that they would just go across the board. So the levy is pretty comparable. We have the add back of the OPEB that we did not levy for last year as a one-time thing. So that came back, and then the inflationary piece on the referendum increases that as well. But we did have a decline in our resident pupil count, which kind of offset the add back of the OPEB a little bit. So, local sources, I just held flat. There's no known increases in fees or anything that I'm aware of. So there's just a few minor changes at the school building level, not barely any change there at all. And then just other considerations, there are things that we know happen for sure that we're getting additional revenue for after the legislature, special education, career and tech, and safe schools. But at this time, we don't have any official numbers or data to back that up. So I've just held them flat for now. And once we have more information, I'll come back with a revised budget that incorporates that. So, and then for expenditures, we have an aggregate increase of about 2.3% on the salaries, and benefits are looking at about 4.05. And the new contract with Benjamin Bus, which I believe you guys just approved at the last meeting, is approximately about a 1% increase, which is really great and much lower than was in the forecast that you guys received in January. So that was good. And then the transformational technology is currently budgeted slightly lower than what was in your forecast in January. It's about $70,000 lower, still being pretty conservative, but that was also a positive thing. Property casualty actually is increasing about 27%, which is quite a large jump. And we also did change carriers to reduce that. It was going to be higher than that if we maintained our current carrier. And in looking historically at that, fiscal year 07 to 09, we had a really significant drop in how much we were paying. And we're now coming back to basically what we were paying in fiscal year 07. So just a little historical information for you on that one. And then non-salary and other operational, we just increased 2% across the board, which is what we've done historically for all the consumable budgets for classrooms and all that good stuff. So. And then just always keeping on the front of my brain the 16% fund balance goal of our unreserved, undesignated expenditures as a percentage, or our fund balance as a percentage of total expenditures. So when we put it all together, estimated revenue is looking about 41.6 million, and the estimated expenditures is 41.3. So we're looking to increase the fund balance about 300,000, which is significantly better than the forecast in January. The forecast was projecting a $400,000 spend down of the fund balance. So I was much happier to see that than going the other way. Aggregate revenue increase is about 1.93, and aggregate expenditure increase is 0.92. So I know this is really tiny, so I had it blown up in your packets so you can see all the numbers. I gave you an extra year of audited results for a little more comparison than I had in the previous presentation. The one thing I do want to point out, when you're looking at the property tax and state source revenue, if you're going across the 4 years, you'll see in the 2011, the property tax revenue and the state source is dramatically different than the other 3 years. That was the year that they did the property tax shift, and it wasn't that we got money from anywhere else, it was an accounting shift basically. So we just moved the money around, but in total it's pretty much the same. So nothing to be concerned about there. And then the other thing I was going to point out is the revised budget for sites and buildings is a significant decrease, and that is much higher because of all the one-time projects that we did and the capital spend down that we're doing this year. So in case you're wondering why that one was so much higher as well. So that's kind of how it breaks down. The unrestricted fund balance is still going to be about 24%, which is consistent with what we're projecting for this year. And then, was that all of them? Oh yeah. Can I pop that back up? Sorry. Got a little quick happy. Okay, so then for the expenditures, the nice thing that I really like to do, having it based on the program level, is it really makes it stand out how much we spend on instruction and student support services, which I think is important compared to our administrative expenditures. So for fiscal year 14, we're projecting to spend 82% of our budget, or about $33.8 million, on instructional or direct student support, and 70% of that 82% is just direct instruction costs. So I think that's really important to show that the administration is really invested in doing what's best for kids and making sure that they have what they need. So lots of numbers. Any questions on any of that?
Thanks, Val. Questions, board members? Who's catching up the notes, Rob?
I was just wondering about the district support services, which is $200,000 more than last year. What that's, I don't even know what it is. So,
district support would be it's the district office, and off the top of my head, it's not jumping out at me what the 200 would be, but I can certainly find out and let you know. It's all of the HR, business office, assessment, all that kind of stuff.
okay, because I was wondering, because there was some reorganization, like how that might have been reflected in these numbers.
Yeah, nope, and it didn't increase the salaries or anything, so in total, so it shouldn't be that. I cannot put my finger on it, but I'll look it up and I'll shoot you guys an email.
Other questions? No? Going once? No?
I think the important reinforcement, as Val has shared, is as we take a look at this, while we understand that there are increases in terms of cost, one of those big ones being property casualty insurance, which I do believe ends up in district support services, doesn't it? It's not pupil support, so I'm thinking it's... We'll get you an exact piece for that. But I think the key issue is we have tried to make sure that we have addressed all of those components. And yet I think we're still holding very firm on our 24% fund balance. And again, I know that was a concern that folks had, that as we went into the implementation of the iPad initiative and whatever, that we would begin to negatively impact the fund balance. And I think because of the fact that we've really been tight about how we have rethought the district office administration pieces and some of the other components, and by being, I think, very careful in terms of even the iPad initiative in terms of the expenditures, where we saw, I think, about a 50% reduction in the cost of the cases alone because we were able to negotiate better pricing. We're really holding our own, I think, very solidly. I think also Val has made it very clear to you that she, just as Stephanie and just as Tom did before that, we operate in a very conservative way. So we're not inflating revenues to make this look good. We're basically identifying what we actually think we will get in additional dollars. And really next year is pretty thin. We really, other than the 1.5% on the basic formula, almost all of the increases that you've heard about from the legislature really occur in year 2. And so really, other than the base formula increase in the first year, there's not a whole lot of increased dollars to go around. And so I think, we're operating with the idea that we can build a budget that is workable and that will reflect making sure that we support our employees and programs, and yet we're staying, I think, in a good place financially. So if something does happen, at least now we think we have a pretty good vision of where we are for the next 2 years. But beyond that, we're again in a very strong position to be able to address any kinds of fluctuations or changes that might occur at the state or the federal level.
Yeah, I guess I'd say, Val, I really appreciated that conservative approach in January because, it's a nice surprise in May to hear that it was 70,000 less on the transformation technology, and that, we had thought we were going to be spending down the fund balance and increase. Those kind of surprises are nice in May, and so I'd rather have you continue in January to take that ultra-conservative approach and feel like as Dr. Richardson said, we are ready to withstand things. So thank you for your report.
Yep, you're welcome.
Oh, Julie, sorry.
I just wanted to ask one question. Do we know what was driving the 27% increase in the property and casualty insurance?
I don't, because that happened while Stephanie was still here, and so I wasn't part of that process. But as far as I know, we haven't had any significant claims. My impression is the market's just getting more in that direction, where they, because I think prior to that it was more competitive. Because in fiscal year 07 to 09 there was a really dramatic drop in the cost. And it's been slowly just inching its way back up. So
I would say more than anything, again, there's a cycle in terms of insurance. And I think if we go back 8 or 10 years, we would have been seeing 8 or 9% increases in insurance on a regular basis each year. When we saw the economic downturn, every insurance company got really hungry. There was a lot of jockeying for property and casualty insurance business, and we saw some really significant reductions. And I think what you're seeing now is kind of a rebalancing of the insurance market, where you're now seeing there's not nearly the competition, and so what we're seeing now is those prices start to come back up again. And I would agree with Val. I'm not aware of anything going on in terms of our either property or casualty or liability or any other areas where we would have any things that would have flagged, a significant increase beyond. I think we're seeing it across districts across the state and across the country.
Okay.
And the fact that we switched carriers to get a better, would have been worse had we not gone to the marketplace and switched that. So I think that says something about the industry as well.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Val. All right, we are ready to move on to our fourth item for discussion. And at the last board meeting, we agreed to develop a focus and set a date for a work session where we would reflect on the issues related to student learning that arose from the community calendar conversations. So I was thinking it might be most efficient if we first talked about a date and then opened it up to the discussion of the topic or set of topics that we thought. And I thought I would suggest to board members, one idea would be to consider whether we want to use after our July meeting, historically, the July meeting has been rather lean, and I think Danita looked it up today. Was it 12 minutes? It was
12
last
minutes.
July.
We went for record, yeah.
So it seems, and talking to Dr. Richardson, we don't foresee a meaty item. A couple years ago, we had the levy discussion in July. We don't have a big thing looming. So one possibility would be to close, at the close of our meeting, to rejigger our tables to be a work session and to hold it on that night. The advantage might be that we all have it on our calendars, including administration. But of course, I want to be open to other ideas. People brought their calendars and are ready to talk about dates. So I guess I'd like to first focus on, let's get a date and then talk about the topic for conversation. So if not July, I guess I'd be open to board members proposing something else. Julie?
I would be in favor of July.
Okay.
I think it's a great idea to do it, and if we've already got the meeting scheduled, if it will fit. That's a great idea.
Anyone have a problem with? Okay. No? All right, well,
Okay.
let's tentatively, we can, once we have the topic, I think, say that that's the date, but I thought it would be easier to start with that. So then in terms of moving forward on the discussion of what we want our focus for our session, I guess I want to open that up to board members. I'd like to advocate for maybe thinking of this session as something we could roll up our sleeves and maybe not ask a lot of administration homework. I was thinking that there are probably a lot of ideas that came out during the community conversations where we could have that sort of media discussion, but why don't I open it up for board members to comment. Julie?
Actually, before we got to that point, I wanted to take a step back, and what I think is an important step for us to take prior to looking at that, and just wanted to present that just sort of a summary of where I feel we've been, and that is that we began the calendar discussion with the intent of determining with the community's input if an alternative calendar could be a key component in helping to address the most pressing issues of student achievement, the achievement gap, and the summer slide. As a board, if we felt strongly about the merits of an alternative calendar, we could have moved forward without the community's input, but we didn't. We made a concerted effort to seek out their views while acknowledging that as key stakeholders, they were a valued part of the decision-making process. The discussion centered around not only what the research has shown to be good for student learning, but also what would be supported within the context and values of the Northfield community. What we heard from those that participated in the meetings, as well as over 450 people who completed the straw poll, is that 80% were in support of a traditional calendar. We need now to listen to what we have been told, that they want our district to remain with the traditional calendar. I believe it's time to take action to put closure on the calendar discussions. I supported convening a work session so that as a board we will have the opportunity to have an in-depth discussion and review of the complex issues of summer slide and the achievement gap. In my mind, the intent of the work session is to discuss, outside of the calendar, strategies and resources that we will continue to employ, as well as the feasibility of new initiatives that will strengthen our commitment to a laser focus on student achievement. Therefore, I would like to offer a motion to add to the agenda under items for individual action the following: to direct administration and the Meet and Confer Committee to develop a traditional calendar for the 2014-15 school year.
So there is a motion on the table to add an item to our items for individual action, to direct administration and Meet and Confer to develop a traditional calendar for the 2014-2015. Oh, why don't you can hand it down there? So
I would second the motion.
Okay, so there's Julie motioned and John seconded. So discussion on adding this item to the agenda as an item for information, or item for action.
Well, I endorse it not just because it sounds an awful lot like what I said 2 weeks ago, but because I think it is what makes sense. And I'm not sure that I do see the benefit of this work session. It seems to me after we've gone through this whole process and we've brought the community in and we've talked to the community, the idea of the 7 of us sitting together in the room talking about other things and saying we want to talk about how to address the summer slide is going to address anything. And what I would like to see us do is use instead the approaches that we've developed with social media and engage the community in a conversation, because it seems to me the issue is not, we think the summer slide is a problem, and we as a board are going to do something about it regardless of all the input that we've gotten. But how do we engage the community in explaining what the issues are and see what other approaches we can develop? And I don't think, and I don't see the advantage of the 7 of us sitting here and talking about it some more separately. I think that what we should do is work on the approaches that we've developed and engage the community in conversation and provide the information that we have that says that we need to address this, and look for approaches from the community. Maybe we can develop a task force, but I don't see the benefit of this work session process, which is why I voted against it at the end of the last meeting.
Okay. Rob?
Well, I guess I agree with Julie and John. I guess the reason that I voted for the work session is because we were given a bunch of comments that were in the straw poll that we had just gotten in our table file. I didn't want to just say, let's act now without having time to look at these. And I think if we do have a work session, which we've agreed to have, that what Julie said about focusing on things other than changing the calendar, I think she's right, the calendar at this point should be taken off the table, changing the calendar, and focus on things that we can do to address summer slide and the achievement gap other than changing the calendar. And I guess I do agree with John that, I mean, since then I've had some conversations with people in the community, like the new library director, and I think it would be really useful to have the way we address this to come out of the community, especially if it's developing assets in the community outside of school to address things like summer slide. I don't think that we're necessarily the people to come up with all of the answers to that. I think that working with the public library, working with HCI, working with some of the people who are on the ground in the schools will have better answers than we might come up with. So I guess if we were to go back in time or in some other way rethink the work session, I would agree with John about that.
Carrie?
I see these as being kind of two separate issues. One is to, well, the motion that's on the table is a motion to add a direction for us to vote on about whether to direct, meet, and confer to develop a traditional calendar. And then the other item that we're in the midst of discussing is what the work session should be about. Right. And so I feel like we're kind of having two conversations simultaneously. With respect to the first, the motion to add an item to the agenda to make a decision on whether to direct, meet, and confer to develop a traditional calendar for 14-15, I think that is a good idea. I think that although I don't want to take tweaking the calendar out of our toolkit forever and all time, I think it is time to put that to rest for now. I still do think there's a lot of value in having a work session, but I think that's a different conversation than the motion that we're dealing with right now. So in that sense, I would support your motion to add an agenda item that would address the issue of whether to direct, meet, and confer to develop a traditional calendar.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. Are there any other comments about the motion or discussion about the motion on the table? No? Ann?
I just want to add that beyond that motion, that we do keep in mind that the calendar might be one of the more important tools in our toolkit for avoiding summer slide. I still think there's a big part of that. So I want to keep thinking about, not just forgetting about the calendar as a part that could help.
this issue.
Okay. Well, I guess we have a motion and a second on the table to add an item for action to direct administration and meet and confer to develop this calendar. And under the items for individual action, if we vote to add that, then we can have an opportunity to discuss that as a separate item as well. So I guess I would support adding it as well as for an item for individual action. So all those in favor of adding that item under our items for individual action, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That'll be our second item for individual action. All right, we are now back at item number 4 for discussion, which is discussing the work session piece. Carrie?
Jump in.
You know, I've, of course, I'm the one who came up with the big idea of having the work session. But I did it because I felt that one of the big things that I thought was lacking in previous discussion was a really good understanding on the part of the board and on the part of the community on achievement gap and summer slide. And so I started kind of putting together a list of the kinds of things that I wanted to make sure we had time to talk about in a work session. And I don't want to make a bunch of homework for administration, but I would like us to talk about the kinds of information we think we need in order to address this. And I'm not saying this is stuff that needs to come to us at the work session, but I think we need to have a much clearer understanding of where our achievement gap is. And although I don't disagree with John's point that we need to put this out to the community, or Rob's, that we need to involve the community in all of this, I think we need to understand this, and our professional staff needs to help us deeply understand that. I don't think that we can just put this out to social media. Here, what should we do for summer slide or the achievement gap? I think we need to have some really good data on what the achievement gap is, where it is, how we go about gathering that information, and how we get information from the affected groups on what our professional staff and also families and students think might be helpful. So when I was just sort of making my list of things I thought we might spend some time talking about at the work session, one was data, the kinds of data that we think a task force might need to have in order to really focus on reducing the achievement gap, eliminating the achievement gap, providing more opportunities for our students. I'd also like to get some good data, or figure out a plan for collecting good data on the Summer Plus program, who does it, why they do it, why they don't do it, what the barriers are there, what kind of instruction is given. Do we have any hard data on Summer Plus and the effect that it has on Summer Slide? Have we done anything to survey parents about whether they're interested in some kind of academic component to the Summer Kid Ventures program? Have we done anything to approach teachers about whether they might be interested in doing some remedial or enrichment kind of J-term kind of classes at the secondary level? So these are all kinds of things that I was thinking we might explore with our professional staff at a work session. Those are just a few things that I kind of came up with as things to think about. I also would like to talk about leveling elementary schools and ideas for pilot programs, but I think that needs to come out of a much more deliberate process and not something that we can deal with just in a 1 or 2 hour work session.
Julie?
Well, one of the reasons that I was really supportive of a work session is, to be honest, I don't feel we do it enough as a board. I feel that It really gives us a really good chance to look at a number of these issues in a setting that allows us to bring to the table people that are involved and to really to have questions asked and answered in a less formal setting. I think that for those of us who serve on different committees, or we run into staff people in the hallways, or we talk to a teacher after a class, we really learn some extremely valuable things in those conversations. And I think that a work session really lends itself to that sort of conversation. I would like to actually see us as a board move more towards work sessions, so I'm really anxious to see how we as a board feel coming out of this work session. I think the number of things that Carrie outlined were excellent. The Summer Plus, I absolutely agree. We've all gone to the open house in the summer, but we've never really looked at the hard data. So I think this is a really good opportunity for us to do that and to really strengthen the programs we have and really look at the feasibility of new ones as we continue our focus on student achievement. I would be hesitant at this point to direct administration's time and district resources towards specific research without having had the conversation collectively as a group. I would see that we would have that meeting, we would talk about all of this and say, well, here's what I would like to know. And I think that conversation really, we feed off each other and we offer different input, as well as having administrators and teaching staff or other professional staff there that can say, well, here, did you think about this? Because obviously we don't have all the answers, and I think a work session allows us to bring in a lot of different viewpoints that we will greatly benefit from that we don't get the opportunity to do at a board meeting.
John?
I don't disagree with any of the goals that have been articulated, but I still disagree with the process, particularly coming so closely on the heels of this public input process. And it still seems to me that the better idea for us as a board is not to sit here and brainstorm and decide amongst ourselves what we think the solutions are, but to get education and community buy-in and a community process going again that talks about something else. And I'm not saying that it can never be the calendar, but I think it's pretty clear as you know, the point I tried to make at the last meeting is exactly the point that Julie made, which is it's too late for us to do it even in 2014, 2015 by now. And if we're going to do anything to significantly change the calendar and to significantly change the community conversation, it's going to require a lot more buy-in and a lot more community education and a lot more community involvement. And I don't see how this process, again, of the group of us talking to ourselves about it addresses that. I think we still need to do something that achieves more community buy-in, achieves more community education, and explains these ideas in a different light rather than here's what we talked about and here's what we're going to do. And I don't think that's a good process for us to follow, a good process model for us to follow, particularly at this point when we've gone through this public input process and the community has spoken.
So I guess I'm just going to jump in because I've been quiet so far, so I feel like I can do that now. I guess I would advocate for what you're saying, John, and that's the reason I think a work session would be helpful, is I think it's the perfect time to reflect back on what just happened in terms of our community sessions and what we learned about engaging the community, and that if we wanted, like you're saying, to capitalize on social network or community involvement as a board, what does that look like? What have we observed over this time? It's a good opportunity to reflect. I guess I was seeing a successful work session would be one, like Julie said, is this a format we want to think about in the future? The city council does this on a regular basis. Just taking off that we wouldn't be voting on anything, it's a work session. Does that lend itself to a really good discussion? So I wouldn't see that the outcome would be that we as a board are, as you know, Selective 7 are going to brainstorm some amazing new idea to put forward. I guess that wouldn't have been the goal I had in mind. But I would think that one of the key things would be just what you're saying, John, to reflect on how we engage the community this time. What do we see in terms of community role, community buy-in? What sort of stakeholders do we want to have board members having conversations with, or how do we see that, playing out in terms of wanting to engage stakeholders in this sort of meaty issues that I think have been brought to the table, such as the summer slide and the achievement gap. And I think that there is some value in the board in reflecting on what we've learned about community involvement and thinking about what our role is as a board and what the role is in engaging the community on these sort of meaty topics. And I would think that we'd have a pretty good discussion, and I wouldn't, at the end of the discussion, I wouldn't see that we'd have a fabulous new idea necessarily, but we might have a different way of thinking about things as a board. So, Rob?
The language you're using of engaging the community and even the language you used of getting buy-in, these make me a little bit, although I understand what you're saying, that they make me a little nervous. I feel like at this point, rather than us having something for which we're getting buy-in or that we're trying to engage the community, and that the community should be what's developing the initiatives. I think, rather than getting us together, get people in the community together who are significant stakeholders. I think there's much more expertise in the community on a lot of these issues, especially the element, as I was saying with the library, the literacy programs that could be developed in partnership with the library, and just an understanding of the poverty that we're dealing with in the community. I don't have that knowledge. Probably a lot of us are not the experts on that. I just feel like this should come out of the community rather than, here's another thing that we're going to do that we want to engage you in. You know what I'm saying? So it just seems like because of this process, there's a little bit of distrust about what's going to come down next. I would rather have it be grassroots rather than from the very beginning, rather than coming down from some discussion that the board has had.
Terry?
I feel like we're talking about two different work sessions. I feel like the work session that John and Rob are talking about is the work session that solves the problem. And the work session that I'm proposing is a work session to understand the problem. And I think that if we better understand the problem, then we can better communicate what the problem is to the community. And then I think at that point, yes, then the community, I think, will want to have a very robust solution to the problem, and we will have these opportunities for partnership. But I think where we really fell down, and I'm overstating it, but I don't think that we did a good job as a board fully understanding the problem that we were trying to solve when we looked at changing the calendar. We had a general sense of it, but I don't think we had a really deep understanding of that. And I feel like I need to have a deeper understanding of what the problem is. And I think if we communicate that deeper understanding of what the problem is to the community, then we're going to be in a much better place to solve the problem. And I feel like this work session just is completely separate from a calendar discussion. I feel like it's just better understanding the achievement gap, better understanding what happens when our students leave us in the spring and come back to us in the fall, and what happens to different groups of students over the summer. And I think once we better understand the problem, then we can decide. Is it an all of the above kind of solution where we reach out to the community, we reach out to our professional staff, we just throw it out there for the whole world to try to solve, or do we engage in some very intentional collaborations, or do we start first with programs that we have control over in the summer, or do we, or end through the school year? But I think the important thing is to understand the problem. And that's what I feel like this work session is for. And so that's, so I'm not asking for buy-in on on a solution to the problem. I'm trying to understand the problem, and I think this board does have a responsibility to understand that problem. That's how I see the work session, what I see the value of it.
Ann?
Very well said. I totally agree. And that you did a really nice job of sort of putting how I feel about it, when I've been thinking about it together, is that, yeah, the problem is not the calendar necessarily, but it could be, calendar could be a tool. So thanks. I think you've really cleared it up for me a bit. I agree with what you just said.
Julie?
Well, I think what Carrie actually did was just articulate the leadership that the school board needs to have. And I think that it's important that that's what we're elected to do. And that's the leadership that the community asks us to provide. And that's what we'll do when we, an example of how the board does, direct the mission of educating our kids to, the greatest extent that we can. And that's the leadership that I think we're elected to provide.
I guess I would chime in that I would also agree that I don't claim to have an understanding of, and I think that thinking about who those people are, that maybe we need to have, see if people are willing to come to a board session, or we have board members go out and gather that information. But I think that the 7 of us don't have all that information, and I don't think we necessarily will. We have people in the community that have that, but I think we do have a responsibility to get a better understanding about these problems, and the achievement gap and is certainly one of them. And I think that, I don't think we're assuming as 7 board members that we are the 7 that are going to solve it, or that we're trying to take over that understanding, that we know that there are these community leaders that have that. So I guess I wouldn't see the work session as go flying in the face of those groups at all, but in just the opposite, trying to, as a board, to figure out where we have our gaps. So, well, we are having a discussion, but we need to focus on a topic, and it sounds like we're not all in agreement. So,
can I give you a few thoughts?
Sure, that would be wonderful.
I think as I've listened to each of you sharing kind of perspectives, number one, I think you have to remember a school board is an elected body. They're elected by the community to make decisions that move us forward. I think they're also elected to make sure that we make good decisions, and that those decisions are based on as much factual information and as much detail and as much thought in terms of looking at the alternatives as you can have. I think as we're looking going forward, there's a couple of things already that are kind of beginning to work. We already know we have a group that's coming together and actually meeting next week that's looking at collective impact. And their focus is really on how do we support student achievement. So if you're looking for that broader group of folks that can help give you feedback on what needs to happen there, that represents the constituencies across the system, I think they have the potential to do that, and they're poised to begin that process. I think that as we think about where we want to be right now, the issue is, I think, as we've looked at the calendar option, we looked at the option that was at the least or no cost to have a potential to make a change that might support the reduction of summer slide and the reduction of the achievement gap. All of the other pieces we're talking about, there's a monetary cost to. And I think we need to really delve into and think about what those costs are. We heard people talk about, well, gee, if we just reduce class sizes, do people really understand what it costs to reduce class sizes? we really need to run a more robust summer program. We run a summer program right now on a shoestring where basically we have to rely on folks and the kindness of folks like the United Way and Wings and others to help make sure that those programs go, because all the dollars we have are getting channeled to get the programs done that we do during the year. I think it would be really important to really come back and talk about, what are the core things we're trying to look at in terms of achievement gap and summer slide, to really think about how important are those to us and what kind of resources are there. But what I also think is that we need to talk very frankly with everybody in the community about the fact that there's very few free lunches. If we're going to attack this issue, we're going to attack it in a way that's going to have the potential of impacting, we know that we're going to talk about increasing the amount of funding that it takes to do those parts. And yes, we can draw in the library, or yes, we can draw in other groups to be involved in that work, but they also then have to establish a portion of their resources to make that happen. So I think the idea of stepping back, this is not a calendar discussion. This is a discussion about how do we support having every child achieve at the highest possible level? How do we support having kids not going backwards? How do we support reduction in the achievement gap so that all of our kids are moving forward? I think that's a much more generic discussion that will help us to at least put our arms around those pieces. I guess I'd also say to you, I absolutely understand the importance of community involvement and community participation in the process. But the other thing I believe is that we have 550 employees of this school district who are trained educators and trained support staff and trained administrators. Those folks better be the first folks that you're going to talk about how are you going to make a change, not the last. Because if that isn't, if there's an issue in terms of trusting folks with good intentions to try to do good things for kids, then we got a whole different issue than just trying to address a concern about students. And my sense is what you heard tonight, what you hear every month from our school district and school staff is the ways that they're doing everything they can to help meet the needs of kids. And really trying to think outside the box and try new ideas and move forward with different strategies. And if we think about what's happened in the last decade in terms of PLCs, in terms of RTI, in terms of technology, in terms of all the other things we're doing with curriculum and instruction, those are not generated by the community. Those are generated by the instructional staff and the administrators in your buildings doing good things for kids. So, please make sure that we keep a balance in terms of understanding that we absolutely need to understand how the community is feeling about certain ideas, and determining are there pieces that really are uncomfortable or make it more difficult for them to meet the needs of their families and to operate as a family. But we also have to balance that with what are the most important needs of kids, knowing that the folks that we have in the system do provide expertise. And, I guess if that's a concern that expertise isn't being provided, then we need to look internally, and that's a whole different work session. I'm done.
Okay.
Off my soapbox. Thank you.
All right. Well, board members, I think we need to put some closure on the discussion, and I wasn't thinking we were going to need a motion and a vote because we'd already voted to have a work session. But if board members would want to add a motion to the agenda to have that as I would rather us not. In the past, we've had a work session. We haven't actually had to vote on the topic. We decided that we were going to have a work session, and I think we decided it was going to be related to the outcomes from the community conversations and focused on student learning. And it seems like we still are centered on that. It sounds like if we had a work session and it isn't a work session having anything to do with the calendar, that it's understanding the problems behind student learning and the achievement gap. It sounds like that's what I'm hearing from board members, is better understanding what the problem is in terms of the achievement gap. What's the relationship with Summer Slide? Understanding potentially what are the costs that we have. I don't know that we need to get into that in the work session in terms of administration providing anything, but we could certainly figure out where we are in terms of our lack of knowledge and what information we would want to have. Understanding that seems to be the things that I've heard board members reflecting on, and it seems like that would be enough for a 1-hour work session just to explore that issue and decide. I guess the only decision we'd have at the end of that work session was it worth our time, and would we ever want to do another one like that? But I think I wouldn't want to have a work session just to try that out. I think that there is actually some real value in reflecting at this moment and thinking about where, as a board, we want to have that leadership and how we want to better understand the issues around which we hear throughout the year about student learning, but I think really consolidating what we know and don't know about the achievement gap would be a worthy thing to discuss. So I guess I would advocate that if there isn't a lot of shaking of heads, that we go forward with the work session following our July meeting. So it's not taking anybody's additional night. It's not taking, for those administrators who would like to be involved, it wouldn't be taking another night of their time. And it would give us an hour or so, I would propose, on focusing on understanding the problem, the achievement gap in Northfield.
Don't forget to say Summer Slide.
And Summer Slide.
Summer
Okay,
Slide.
and Summer Slide. We'll do that then. To better understand the problem, the achievement gap in Summer Slide. All right? Okay. Great. We are going to move on then to the first item for individual action. Tom Groutman has been very patient. Board members, you had in your packets the recommendations from the Activity Advisory Committee, which I believe Julie is our board representative on. And Tom, do you want to say a few words before we have a motion on the table?
Well, there's 2 items, I believe, the
Right.
lacrosse and then the middle school basketball. I'm not sure which is first in your packet.
Lacrosse.
Okay. Well, I think, and by the way, Rich, thanks for being here this evening as well. I think that really the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. And the real numbers of kids that are actually playing the game of lacrosse in our city and in our area in the state of Minnesota. And the other proof is in the athletic interest survey that we conducted in February. So we really see the interest. We see that the program will be able to sustain itself both in the girls and the boys side. And I feel very confident that it's time to consider adding lacrosse, both boys and girls, at the JV and varsity level.
Okay. So board members, you have the superintendent's recommendation in front of you to approve the Activity Advisory Committee's recommendation to add the sport of boys and girls lacrosse for beginning with the 2013-2014 school year. I'm asking for a motion. Moved by Carrie.
Second.
Oh, who's seconding?
Sorry.
Julie? Okay.
Sorry.
Were you trying to move that?
No.
Moved by Carrie, seconded by Julie. Any discussion? Julie?
I just wanted to make a comment specifically with Rich Falk being here and just compliment the Lacrosse Association for the incredible work that they have done and the opportunities that they have created for kids in our district. And I think it's a really shining example of how our associations are real partners with us, because there's many things that they do that we as a district could not do. And they have partnered with us. They have understood the challenges. They have overcome the challenges. And I think that you as a group should feel really wonderful about the opportunities that you have given the kids in this district. And we thank you for that.
John?
Tom, did you realize that Rich Falk was a letter winner on Northfield's first varsity soccer team?
I did hear that back, I think, in one of our lacrosse meetings we had back last June. A pioneer.
Pioneer.
Right. Up.
So is the district will buy, there's a line on here for equipment, they'll provide equipment for anyone who wants to play?
Well, I think what we are going to look at here is we're going to liken this to the hockey program, where the school provides some of the equipment but not all the equipment. So it'll be similar that way, and also it'll be similar in structure, where the school provides a junior varsity and varsity hockey program, but it's really the Youth Hockey Association, both the boys and the girls, that really provide the opportunities both in practice and competitively for those kids to play the game of hockey. And we'll see that the same way happening in lacrosse, where lacrosse will continue to do what they do with their association. The kids will get to really the 7th, 8th, and then the high school level, and then the school will take over with the JV and varsity program. So it'll be similar that way, and also similar, Rob, with the equipment that you brought up. There will be some certainly that the students and the lacrosse association will provide, and then certainly the school will need to also subsidize some.
Other questions or comments? No? All right, we have a motion and a second on the table to support the superintendent's recommendation to approve the Activity Advisory Committee's recommendation to add the sport of lacrosse for boys and girls beginning in the 2013-2014 school year. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Now we have a second item on this for individual action from the Activities Advisory Committee. Do you want to say a few words on that one, Tom?
Yeah, that's the middle school basketball and the discontinuance of that program. And we've seen a decrease in participation these last 4 to 5 years. And we're at a point now where the Northfield Basketball Association is fully ready to take that program on and provide the basketball opportunities for both girls and boys at that 6th, 7th, 8th grade level. And frankly, they're already doing that, and they've been doing that for quite a number of years. We really talked at length with the Activities Advisory Committee about this. We also solicited the advice and direction of basketball coaches in our school, Tony Matheson, and the new head boys basketball coach too, Andy Bergbaum, and they're very confident that the discontinuance of this program will not hinder participation as they continue on in our school programs. We also had 2 members of the Northfield Basketball Association on our Activities Advisory Committee, with one being a board member of the NBA, and they're very comfortable and confident too of the direction of the NBA taking the program on fully.
Okay. Before we have any comments or questions, I would ask the board a board member to make a motion to support the superintendent's recommendation, which is to approve the Activities Advisory Committee to discontinue the middle school intramural basketball program for start beginning in the 2013-14 school year. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by John. Is there a second? Seconded by Ann. All right. Questions, comments? Julie?
Well, Tom, it might be interesting to point out what, with the replacement of the middle school basketball time slot for the gym, what might be the opportunities to program that gym space.
Right, and that's you bring that up, I look at Erin Mayberry. What we foresee happening will be more opportunities for the after-school program also for the middle school to use perhaps that auxiliary gym to let their after-school 6th, 7th, and 8th graders have that space. We're also looking at perhaps using the big middle school gym for our high school program to go over there, and they can practice perhaps with a girls program or a boys program, flip-flopping back and forth with the high school, so the boys and girls are both sharing both the high school gym space and the middle school gym space right after school, which is really prime time. What that will do then is it'll create some more open gym time for both the NBA, the soccer association, probably lacrosse, volleyball, and other users to use our gyms at a better hour, so our younger children aren't using our gym really after 9 o'clock. We can open those gyms up, especially the high school and the middle school gym, for our associations, for our community ed programs. So again, our younger children can finish their practices and participation at an earlier hour. So we see a snowball effect that might be a little silver lining with this whole thing.
Go ahead, Julie. Or Carrie, sorry.
Are there students now who do the intramural program and do the NBA program?
Yes.
Is that the bulk of the students who do both? Or?
It's about 50-50, and this year we saw an increase with the 8th grade boys in their participation, because I think their NBA coach said they had to play in that program or you're not playing for me. So one of the coaches played a little hardball with them. So we saw an increase, but overall we've really seen not very good participation numbers with both boys and girls.
So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, are there students who would only do the intramural program who would not be able to access the NBA program, and how many kids are we talking about?
Yeah, there's some of those kids. I really can't put a number on that, but it's not a lot. This will kind of frame it up a little bit, I think, for all of us, and it really framed it up for me as well. One of the coaches, who's also a female, one of our counselors, it's Deb Rasmussen, fine basketball background, really great coach. She really said to me, because I asked for the middle school coaches what their thoughts were about the program and the continuation of the program, and she really said that some of the girls and boys that she sees participating that are not part of the Northfield Basketball Association, it really doesn't matter what the activity would be. It could be sliding, it could be lifting weights, it could be anything. It doesn't really have to be basketball. They just want to do something after school. So it's really not the basketball they're looking for. They want to do something, though, with kids after school. We also believe we have that in place with our middle school strength and conditioning program, that if there's something physical that the kids want to do, that can be the thing that they can do, and also the middle school after school program.
Okay.
So it's hard to put a finger on it. I don't have those numbers of how many kids that would be, but again, it really hit home when Deb said, Tom, they could be sliding or, playing in the snow outside. We had a little bit of that, mostly in April and May this year. But,
jumping in the slush.
Really, she said it doesn't matter what the activity is. They really didn't care if they played basketball or not. They just wanted to do something after school.
And we're confident that we have enough other things for them to do after school.
I feel good about it, yes.
Okay.
Yes, for those kids.
Other questions? I guess I had one comment, is that I have really seen, having a daughter in the NBA, that they've really reached out in terms of making it more accessible and providing, it seems like, more scholarships. I think the sports collaborative has really helped. So I guess I when I looked at this, I wasn't as concerned about that, and it looks like the younger kids would still have the community ed Saturday morning. So I thought, well, the kids that were choosing it for basketball and not just an after-school program wouldn't limit them, because it seems like the financial piece has been handled really well by the community so far. All right, we have a motion and a second on the table to support the superintendent's recommendation to discontinue the middle school intramural basketball program beginning in the 2013-14 school year. Any other questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
We are ready to move on to items in the consent grouping. I'll remind board members. Oh.
You have your new item number 2.
Thank you. You catch me, Danita. All right, we are ready to move on to our last item for action. We had a motion to add to the agenda an item to discuss in terms of having the administration and meet and confer develop a traditional calendar for the 2014-2015 school year. Is there a motion? We have a motion to add to the agenda item, which we voted on. Now I'm looking for a motion so we can discuss it here.
So moved.
Moved by John. So that motion would be to direct administration
And the meet and confer committee to develop a calendar for the 2014.
Traditional
2015.
calendar. Yeah.
Traditional.
And we're defining traditional as after Labor Day start.
As required by state law.
Correct.
So we have a motion, that's awesome.
Right.
It's not been seconded.
Seconded by
I'll
Carrie.
second
All right. Discussion. Carrie?
I'll make a comment. I just thank Julie for bringing this up and very firmly putting the calendar issue to bed for 14-15, at least through 14-15.
Any other? No? All right. All those in favor of approving the motion to direct administration and meet and confer to develop a traditional calendar by state law for the 2014-2015 school year? That's not really part of a motion, though.
Oh, part of the motion.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now, we are ready to move on to the items in the consent grouping. And I will remind board members that were a few additional personnel items added in your table file. Ask for a motion to approve the consent grouping.
So moved.
Moved by John.
Second.
Seconded by Ann. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. We have four items for information. The first item is a reminder that tomorrow at 1 o'clock, our area learning center will have their commencement, and board members are invited and have been invited formally to attend. It's always a wonderful and moving event. The second item is a reminder about the high school graduation. You should have received a letter from the high school. The ceremony's at 2, but we're assembling in the office. I don't have the letter in front of me, but
1:30.
1:30.
I was going to say, I think it's about a half hour early. The forecast is a high of 63, so.
Good thing we're wearing
But
black
sunny.
robes.
But sunny.
But yes, it doesn't look like it's going to rain, so dress accordingly. Everybody has their caps and gowns. And the third item is that you had your the board schedule. There is one Tuesday in November to note in the upcoming year. And then our fourth item, Dr. Richardson, do you want to just say a couple items as a teaser?
There's the teaser. This is what I've gathered in just the last several weeks in terms of this last legislative session. I did spend a week ago, Saturday, during the day and into the evening with the tax conference committee as they got through their piece of it. What we'd like to do next time will be to share a little bit about the details of the K-12 omnibus bill and also the K-12 tax bill as it impacts schools. Some really good news on some pieces, some more interesting news on other pieces, and a real opportunity to, I think, see for the first time in a long time some efforts to try to address equalization of property-rich and property-poor districts. So we'll have more detail. One of the reasons that we weren't ready to do it tonight is I know Tom is actually presenting at Southeast Service Co-op on Thursday, Tom Melcher. As of the last time I talked to Tom, which was just a couple of days ago, they do not have all the details of this thing worked out. And so there are some things that they still are not exactly sure how they're going to come together. So hopefully by the 10th we'll be able to have more detail, because there are some definite changes in terms of again, how the equalization is going to impact referendum and dollars that are coming into districts. The good news is, however, for low valuation districts like Northfield, we should see an increase in the amount of state aid versus property tax mix, and that's always a good thing.
Great. Good teaser. Next time.
Next time.
All right, board members, I'll remind you about future meetings. We have the first meeting in June and the first meeting in July, June 10th and July 8th. I'd also remind board members that after we adjourn, we have a closed negotiation session. So, with that, I would ask for a motion for adjournment. Moved by Ann, seconded by John. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.